In the United States of America, in the state of Ohio, about 45 minutes northwest of Cincinnati, there's a large but sparsely populated farming community known as Oregonia. Some of you who have interest in motorcycles may have heard of it before, as the community is famous for its hills. So famous, in fact, it holds the annual Devil's Staircase hill climb, where motorcyclists ride their bikes up a very steep hill. It's a lot more fun than it sounds, and it brings a lot of money and excitement to what is normally a very boring area. These hills are very steep and numerous. Within these valleys you will find abandoned houses, mines, caves, and a lot of wild game. Every child who grows up in Oregonia will become familiar with these hills, as they will have nothing better to do than walk them and explore. But as every child in Oregonia knows, these valleys are dangerous. And if there's something you should never, ever do in Oregonia, it isn't walk the waterfront with a fat wallet, or badmouth Ralphie J. Stoley. It's that you never walk the valleys during a purple sky. Purple skies mean different things. Usually, it means a storm is coming, or it's just an odd quirk of the sun setting, but some people believe it has different, more spiritual meanings. Some people think it means death is close, or that a lot of people somewhere have died. But for the Shawnee, who used to live in the valleys, it was an omen favoring war. Me, I just know to stay inside when it happens. Because I didn't, once. And I almost never made it back home. My story begins as most of my childhood stories. I was walking in the valleys of Oregonia. It was a rather warm winter day, and I was alone, scouting the hills a few miles away from my house, looking for dens of deer to hunt the next season. I was 13. We didn't have cell phones back then, nor did I have a GPS, but I always seemed to know where I was. Some locals may claim the hills are quite hard to navigate, but in reality, it's pretty easy. Just follow the water if you ever get lost. Almost every valley has a creek at the bottom, and you can follow it all the way to the river, where you can find the bike trail and the waterfront district of Oregonia, and the highway isn't far from there. Getting lost in the valleys may be easy, but staying that way is actually quite hard. I had discovered a new valley, as I had strayed further from home than I ever had before. It may sound boring, but for a bored country kid, pretending to be an explorer in unknown territory is more fun than any video game. I was so absorbed that I lost track of time. I came to my senses when I heard the drums. 10 beats, echoing loudly through the hills. I shrugged it off as an echoing gun or a car backfiring. Coming to my senses, I finally checked my watch. It was 8 o'clock, but the sun sat on the edge of the sky. I chalked it up to a bad battery, and having my fill of exploring for the day, I decided to make my way back home. I began climbing the hill behind me, following my own tracks to get back to a place I recognized. When I got to the top of the hill, I found myself in an odd situation. I didn't recognize where I was. I was up high enough to see anything I wanted. I could have seen my house on the top of the hill 3 miles away to the north. I could have seen Mr. Carroll's ranch to the west. I could have seen the highway to the east. I could have been able to see the river at the bottom of the valley. But I didn't. None of it was there. I turned around, thinking maybe I was simply disoriented, but at the top of each hill, I saw nothing but trees and bushes. Except for one hill. Just in front of the setting sun to the west, I saw a smokestack silhouetted against a beautiful purple sky. Campfires aren't uncommon in Oregonia, so I didn't think much of it. I heard the drums again. This time, 9 beats, all in a row, echoing throughout the valleys. I shrugged it off again as simple gunfire. They were very common in Oregonia. Using the sun as a reference point, I found my way. I needed to head east, the way the river flowed. I would run into a creek eventually and get my bearings. It took me half an hour to descend the hill and walk in the valley, looking for evidence of a creek bed. I checked my watch as the ground leveled out. It was almost 9. The sun hung on the edge of the western sky. It hadn't moved. I remember telling myself it was just a simple illusion. I worried more about how angry my parents would be with me for coming home after dark, because at the rate I was going, it would be at least another hour or so before I would find my way back home. If only. I walked the flat of the valley until it ended. I knew I had to be close to the river, and the hill that I was at was high, so I figured I could probably see something if I climbed it. While I climbed, I heard those drums again. 8 beats. Still, I ignored it. I got on top of the hill, and to my dismay, found I recognized nothing yet again. I chuckled to myself. My dad was never going to let me live this down, getting lost in Oregonia. When we hunted, I was often his navigator. I could find my way back just by seeing individual trees. I looked in all directions. Nothing north, nothing south, nothing east. But to the west, the sun was still setting. I looked at my watch. It was 10 o'clock. The sun hadn't moved. I took off my watch. I knew the sun was setting. Nothing stops the sun from setting. I still ignored the signs, save for one. The smokestack. While my back was turned, it had grown, and it was a valley closer to me. 7 beats echoed throughout the hills. That's when I really noticed the drums this time. They were louder. I began to get a little panicked. I enjoyed the solitude of Oregonia more than most, but even I had my limits. I tried to ignore the drums, and I even wondered if they were real or just my imagination. I did what I had been told to do if I was ever lost. I pulled out my knife and marked the nearest tree with an X. And then I moved east, my back to the sun and the smokestack. I made my way down the hill, marking each tree I passed with an X. Like a roller coaster, walking in Oregonia only takes you down for so long. Before I knew it, I was climbing a hill again. 6 beats. I turned around to face the smokestack. It was closer still. The sun hadn't moved. I grabbed a long stick and sharpened the end with my knife. I told myself it was for coyotes and wild dogs, but I knew. Something primal in me kicked in, and I knew. I was being hunted. I began to hurry down the hill, quickly marking my X's and keeping my stick handy. I hurried so quickly, I tripped on a rock. I rolled and rolled, trying to stop myself by grabbing onto anything, but the hill was too steep, and the ground too hard. I caught a hold of a root for a moment, but I pulled it straight out of the ground. I tucked in and rolled to the bottom, hitting my head on a few rocks when I finally stopped. 5 beats. Something moved in the woods in front of me, but I couldn't tell what it was. On the way down, I dropped my knife and my stick. I struggled to my feet and turned around. I was in a clearing. Surrounded on all sides was a thick forest of trees. And all of them had X's on them. 4 beats. I turned west, and to my horror, the smokestack was only a valley away. The sun hadn't moved. I grabbed a few rocks and sticks and moved up a hill. All the trees had X's on them. I couldn't tell if I had been there before. Some of the X's looked like they were cut with metal into bark, while others looked wider, less clean, like it had been carved with stone. I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going home. I was finding shelter. Just before the top of the hill, I found exactly what I was looking for. A cave, as several dot the landscape of Oregonia. It faced west, towards the smokestack and the sun. 3 beats. I set up a fire pit and began making a fire. It hadn't snowed or rained in days, so making a fire even without any flint wasn't that difficult. I got a few sparks going against the dry leaves. As I leaned in to blow into the flames, I felt something push my back, and I plummeted face first into the fire pit. Something had kicked me into the fire. 2 beats. I grabbed a rock and sharpened a stick as best I could, and then I backed slowly into the cave. The smokestack was in my valley now. All the birds and bats in the trees flew away, and all the rats inside the cave ran outside. Then, something tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around to see nothing but cave, and a shadow on the wall. 2 shadows. I sprinted forward into the cave, screaming. I heard the final beat, and before I knew it, the smoke wasn't in the valley anymore. It was in the cave with me. I was being smoked out. Hardly able to breathe, I kept pressing east, deeper into the cave. In the brief flashes of light I was allowed, I swear I saw drawings inside the cave, drawings of men slaying animals. I ran into a rock wall, but I noticed a ray of light above me. I clawed into the wall and began climbing towards the light. The hole was big enough for my head, so I used the stick as a makeshift shovel to beat away some of the dirt and rocks. It got big enough for me to climb through. I put my right arm through first and tried to pull myself up, but it wasn't quite large enough. Then something grabbed a hold of my leg. I pulled, and so did it, and it was winning. I screamed for help, and I tried grabbing anything to pull myself out of the cave. I got a hold of a root and began pulling. I kicked whatever had a hold of my leg and pulled myself up. I was almost all the way through when something grabbed my left leg and pulled harder. I had leverage this time and pulled with all my might than I ever had before. I felt my shoe and socks come off as I pulled myself out of the ground. I rolled away from the hole and onto a paved road. I lay on the road for a few moments, watching the moon. It was a hunter's moon. It was the most beautiful moon that I had ever seen. I sat up and saw my leg. Whatever had a hold of me didn't just take my shoe and sock. It had taken chunks of skin below the knee. I checked my watch. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. A group of kids out late passed me on the road and got me to a hospital. My leg healed with time. I told my parents I was simply lost in the woods and was attacked by a wild animal. I lived to walk the valleys again. But after that day, I never went out when there was a purple sky.